Hello everyone, I'm Instructor Hollon, and this lecture introduces feminist care ethics. McKay explains the feminist orientation or approach to ethics in the following manner. Feminism is defined as an ethical, as an intellectual commitment and a political movement that seeks justice for women and the end of sexism in all forms. You could find more information on the definition and the aims for feminist philosophy and ethics in general in Feminism and Feminist Ethics in Matthew's 2020, pages 64 to 74. So, in feminist ethics, the aim influences the approach or study of ethics, that is, feminism influences then our orientation to the study of ethics, because traditional ethics was charged with favoring male ways of moral reasoning that emphasized rules, rights, universality, and impartiality over against female ways of moral reasoning that emphasize relationships, responsibilities, particularity, the individual people, and partiality. You could see for the citation and discussion there, see Yeager in Matthew's 2020, page 35. The worry is that traditional ethics or traditional ways of doing ethics, the whole orientation uh, of moral reasoning, looks like the, they stem from patriarchal or male dominant cultures that downplay the relation of caring or emotions. The emphasis is more on reasoning through like mathematical sums or equations, or using universal principles rather than caring or emotions. Okay, so as such, traditional ethics had underrated culturally feminine traits like interdependence, community, connection, sharing, emotion, body, and trust, absence of hierarchy, nature, immanence, process, joy, peace, and life. Very variated and dynamic as opposed to simple rules or something like that. Again, citing Yeager in Matthew's 2020, page 35. Okay, so the immediate contrast when you think of feminist ethics, and specifically care ethics, think of the contrast with more quote unquote irrationally oriented systems, or systems that depend in systems in which human reasoning ability features prominently, in contrast then to this system, or subsystems, even different versions of feminist ethics and care ethics, that put more emphasis on the role of emotional responses and the interrelationships, interdependent and interconnected relationships of people in the situations, right? So in moral context, you might really be concerned with the relationships between everyone involved and not just thinking about producing the most benefit for everyone, which is more impartial. So the care ethics thinks, the ethicist emphasizes more partiality, and practically that we do care for, we can understand why others would care for certain people more, and we also care more for, say, our families and loved ones or children than a complete stranger we've just met. Okay, um, so care ethics wants to take the real dynamic of human relationships into account in moral reasoning. So let's look at this a section on gender in moral reasoning and the ethics of care. So to highlight some examples discussed by Carol Gilligan and Nell Noddings in demonstrating the differences of moral reasoning in young boys and girls, and men and women, see Mackay in Matthew's 2020, pages 66 to 67. Okay, uh, one classic example that you'll read about which you'll read, and you can uh, about which you can find information online easily, is a case where uh, we asked uh, physicians asked young children responses to a case, and we asked uh, boys and girls what they would do in a situation, and predominantly uh, the situation involves the question involves a scenario where uh, you can do something like steal something, say money, to help someone in need, a loved one, a family member who needs medicine. Okay, um, so you can get away with it. You think you can, and what we found was that boys think more generally, not always, but more often than not, boys think that it's okay to steal money, in an example, to to get medicine for a family member in need in the hospital or sick. Okay. Now, girls predominantly, not all of them, but predominantly answer differently and were more concerned with not just the outcomes, but with the relationships. They said we shouldn't steal the money mostly, and they were concerned that the relationships could be adversely affected if you were caught stealing. If you were caught stealing, then what would happen to you or to your family member, your father, say, who's sick? It could be even worse than uh, how things will unfold naturally. Okay, so there was a contrast in this case where boys tended to, not always, but they tended to think more in terms of utilitarian ideas, looking at the outcome more, thinking, well, if we can steal this money, we can produce a desirable effect because then we can get the medicine for our sick father or mother, right? Whereas the girls thought non-utilitarian and focused more on the relationships of the children and their sick family member. Wow, and they thought, well, those relationships themselves can be adversely affected if we're caught stealing. Maybe if we get caught, we have to go to jail or something like that, and then you won't be able to see your sick family member even if they're sick, and then there's just a host of other possible scenarios when they're unclear. Okay, so there was a big contrast there, and you can read more about these kinds of cases. And for information, again, see the Mackay in Matthew's 2020, page 66 to 67. So while men focused on justice and rights or calculations, women were more likely to think about the relationships in making moral decisions. Okay, that's like the big takeaway, I think, to contrast the emphasis on emotion and care and relationships and care ethics in contrast to something like utilitarianism. Okay, so for the next section, let's look at natural care versus ethical care. Okay, so Carol Gilligan, referred to natural caring. Okay, and the idea is that we should take account of more feminine or natural female ways of moral reasoning. Okay, and there was some concern about maybe that doesn't quite capture the depth of of the caring involved. If it's just something you do naturally, you might do it instinctively without a deep maybe a feeling or emotion, as deep a feeling or emotion, with no thought, right? It's too instinctive, not enough, and it doesn't have enough thought. So Noddings, uh, Nell Noddings developed a slightly different spin on care ethics, and she distinguishes between two types of care and emotions. Then, one is the natural kind. Think of Carol Gilligan, and the second she wants to call ethical care. Okay, so with natural care is the type of care a mother has for her child. It's instinctive again and natural and doesn't require much thought. But ethical care is broader and extends to others beyond your, say now in this case, your children, after questioning our own needs. So it's the willingness to move beyond our needs and to think about the needs of others, even with whom maybe we might not be very familiar or something. And that's what brings us into the ethical field more, at least greater degree. Okay, and so that causes us to move past our focus on our self needs, desires, and truly consider the needs of others. And so in so doing, the context of ethical care is created. So there's a contrast there even within care ethics then, with what Carol Gilligan had developed, focusing more on natural emotional responses and caring, versus Nell Nodding's development, where, well, that's fine and dandy, but we can actually go deeper than that in her reasoning, anyways. And that extends to when we move beyond what just comes natural into really sacrificing ourselves then, in a sense, and really thinking about the needs of others, even if it doesn't immediately benefit us in some way in our own relationships, I think is the idea. Okay. So there also are recent developments then, just as Noddings had developed Gilligan's ideas, and there are even further developments. And McKay notes recent developments regarding feminist care ethics. But these are best considered after turning to some objections. I just think they make more sense, and you probably will remember them better. So we'll look at some other nuanced views of care ethics, some other different views of care ethics when we look at the objections next week. Okay, so I note that now that we are going to look at some others. Okay, so we'll revisit these developments next week, and they might just be developments on Nodding's system too, or something. But you'll see that people have done different things with the theory. Okay, so we'll revisit these developments next week when we turn to the objections and responses. Okay, so I've also included, in addition to the assigned readings and the readings listed, I've included multimedia on the subject of care ethics. Links in PDF for direct sources, and some multimedia, some videos, discussions, and interviews. Please take advantage of the material while you can, and take advantage of the time and learn a little bit about care ethics with the multimedia. And if you have any questions about care ethics, the initial approach, the emphases, why, maybe anything we covered, feel free to send me an email, or stop in office hours, or ask a question in the discussion forums. I'm happy to answer in any way I can, and help make the course enjoyable as we learn more about care ethics. Okay, so I will see you guys next week when we turn to objections to care ethics. Thank you.